20 seconds. Well, who's counting? Me. I'm up. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Michael Spencer with Empowering Pastors, and we are excited that today you're watching with us. We have a tremendous gift of the church right here with us, and his name is Greg Clur. He's from South Africa, and he is with us today to do training, and you are going to walk away tremendously blessed. So let me ask you to do something before you even begin. Could I please get you to share this on your Facebook page, share this in your Twitter account, share this on your Instagram, share this even in your email? Could you do me a favor, and you will not ever regret it, if you could maybe make a phone call to somebody, a friend of yours who's in ministry, and suggest that they tune on to the Empowering Pastors Facebook right now or our YouTube right now, and allow them to hear this great man of God. He oversees and helps and has helped build one of the largest TV stations. Actually, I believe it is the largest TV station in all of Africa. They also reach into England. They're also in the United States of America, as well as he oversees, I believe, near 40 businesses within the church. And so he has tremendous business skills. He is an accountant by trade, correct? Accountant by trade, but also a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ. He is also the third-year teacher of the Bible College in South Africa, and make sure that the students that are getting ready to leave are leaving at the highest level to where they will be able to minister to as many souls as possible. If you'll please welcome with me Pastor Greg Clur.
Thank you, Pastor Michael. And for those of you that are in the auditorium, for those of you who are viewing today, it's my privilege to be with you. But Pastor Michael, it's an honor for me to be here. I'm submitted to your authority, sir. And thank you very much for this opportunity to share. And I'm a little bit nervous today because normally I don't get nervous to speak, but I am today because the Lord has put something on my heart, and I submit it to you, and I need to share it. But let me just say, this time is for empowering pastors. And I've been in the privileged position now of being in ministry for nearly 2 decades, not as a senior pastor, but in support to the senior pastor. But close enough that I have seen the price of leadership. You know, there's this, I play music, I play guitar, and I play blues. I love blues. I am saved, but I love blues. And there's a line you hear in blue music: you pay the cost to be the boss. You pay the cost to be the boss. There's a price to leadership. How many of you agree we've been through a crazy year? We're still in a crazy year. Yeah, but it's a time of opportunity, and I'm going to talk about that. But I've been close to my senior pastor, very close. In fact, I'm so close to him, I married his older sister. But I'm also involved in administration of ministry, and that can be a very dangerous thing, and I'm going to talk about that in this session. And I've seen what it is to lead a ministry. So Pastor Michael, for you and Pastor Rhonda, I promise you, I know what that cost is. I really do. And so today, I'm not going to teach from the perspective of being a senior pastor. I'm going to teach from the perspective of being in senior leadership in support of a senior pastor. But so I kind of wear 2 caps. I'm at a very senior level in the ministry, but I'm also part of the team. So I understand the team dynamic. I understand what's involved in that intimately. You know, I've noticed something in ministry, that most people that criticize leadership in ministry aren't in a position of leadership. Perhaps more to the point, most people that criticize leadership criticize it from a perspective of self-interest as opposed to corporate interest. The leader is thinking about the corporate interest of ministry, not his comfort, not necessarily the comfort of the team. He's thinking about purpose as opposed to comfort. Because purpose is very seldom comfortable. Have you noticed that? And so I've been in this situation where I've seen the pressure that men and women of God go through as leaders of ministry. And if you're a pastor leading in ministry and you're watching me today, you have my respect for what you do. And today is really a message of encouragement for you. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things we've done in our ministry globally and back at home, and I'll talk more about that. But it's really going to be a message of encouragement. You know, this year has been a year of severe disruption. You would agree?
Yeah.
And out there in the world, I talk to people, and people are living in fear. They are terrified. Now, I understand the need for social distancing. I understand the need for taking precautions and not just being silly. But I cannot and I refuse to live in fear because I know who my Savior is.
Amen.
And as a ministry, we've had to take that into account in terms of the corporate purpose in the ministry. And I'm going to share some of the things that my senior pastor has implemented in the ministry and how much I respect it for what it is for. Now, you could be watching this and you could be leading a ministry where you haven't lost anybody. You know, at home in South Africa, our church was closed for 4 months, shut the doors. There was nobody in the building. Your church is just shut. What do you do? Crazy time of disruption. Now that the doors have opened in South Africa, we limited at the moment under current regulations to a maximum of 250 people in a building. That's difficult for us because we've got a building that's 600,000 square feet big.
Wow.
But we can only have 250 people in that building. This is a time of disruption. For some ministries, they haven't lost anybody. They have continued exactly as they have gone. So my message today is not really about whether you've lost somebody or whether you've managed to successfully navigate through this. It's actually about what happens next. So this message is a message of encouragement. I've seen some ministries at home where probably, now that we've reopened, 2/3 of the congregation are gone. I thought they were disciples. Where are they?
Right.
Now I'm a disciple, but I'm in the comfort of my lounge watching you digitally. That's my new church. Is that an acceptable reality? These are difficult questions that we have to talk about. And I really want to talk today about a preferred future. That God has a preferred future for your ministry. And I want to start with point 1. I've got about four general points. And in them there will be a bit of detail. But point 1 is this question of perspective. What is your perspective of your ministry future? Point number 1. You know, I had a very good friend who used to ride, and still does, ride motorbikes. And he went on a tour of India, particularly rural India. And he came back with this story, which we all marveled at. And he said, you know, we were riding with the team in rural India, and we came across this ox cart. But this ox cart had square wheels. Yeah. And we all laughed. And you derided, you know, how backward are these people? And I even was teaching Pastor Michael, a third-year student class, about 2 or 3 years ago. And I was talking about this, and the Spirit of God stopped me in my tracks. He said, have you considered that cart gets pulled up and down a slope? What happens when it rains? Perspective is everything. Did I feel a fool? Pride had to be dealt with. What is your perspective of your ministry future? What perspective, what lens are you looking through? Are you looking through the lens of past experience, or are you looking through the lens of possibility? Do you know, the Lord took me to Moses. I just keep going to Moses. This incredible, interesting person, Moses. Have you considered that at the burning bush, he experienced a change in perspective. There was a paradigm shift in his life from what he thought was possible to actually what was possible. God took a man and gave him a picture of emancipating the slaves right at the beginning. And he had grown up in the palace. Maybe he had a paradigm or a frame of reference, if you like, in his life of being able to successfully administrate things, to build things, make things work. But all of a sudden, the Lord gave him a vision much bigger than he had possibly ever had in his life. And he had to deal with things in his life. Well, who am I? I can't speak. But that was Aaron's job opportunity. Right. What you think is your handicap is just an opportunity for a team. That doesn't disqualify you from what God has for you. So it's a question of perspective. And Moses had a radical change of perspective as to what was possible. You know, we've been through a potentially disruptive situation with COVID-19. Well, the question is that disruption so bad? It can either be negative or it can be positive. The question is, what are you going to do with it? And I want to encourage you, if you're in leadership or in ministry and you are in your prayer room and you're asking God for direction, don't stop asking Him for direction. The Lord will give you superior wisdom for what you need to do. We have the ability to emerge from this period of disruption much more successful at our assignment than possibly before. Yes, the world is going to look different. One of the things Moses had to do, though, is he had to step away from that experience of the burning bush with an attitude of a strong resolve and an attitude of obedience to instruction. Our future success is going to lie in our ability to be obedient. Now, there are a couple of points I want to make on this. So if you're watching this broadcast, I encourage you to make some notes. The first one is, for us that are in leadership in ministry, we need to approach our ministry leadership with deliberate and decisive intent. We cannot be anything other than single-minded about what God has asked us to do. Now is the time to strengthen your leadership confidence and resolve to actually make decisions in line with what God is saying to you. I was talking to Bible school students earlier on this morning, and I always like sharing this because, you know, there's a difference between being famous and being great. Being famous or having a popular reputation is often giving people what they want, but being great is giving them what they need. Now is the time to give people what they need more than ever before. Because when I observe humanity, this COVID-19 pandemic is a global phenomenon. Yes. I traveled here from South Africa. It took over 30 hours to get here. And sitting on an aeroplane with visors and gloves and masks and trying to remember to pick up the visor when I'm drinking something so it doesn't spill everywhere. It's chaos if you choose to live like that. Yeah? But everything has changed. Everything has changed. This is a global phenomenon. I promise, for people that are in the United States, many of you might not have traveled internationally over this time, of course. But when you do, everything you're experiencing here, you're going to experience wherever you're going. It's the same. It's the same thing. The question is, how do we lead our ministries through that? Now's a time for deliberate and decisive intent in our decisions. Because if we don't do that, I submit to you, senior pastor, that your ministry will become a high-risk and expensive experiment. Now's the time for it to do exactly what the Holy Spirit leads you to do. You know, the school fees are great. You don't want to pay those school fees. The second point is, God does not promote us based on our gifts and our abilities. Those are irrevocable, but He doesn't promote us on that. So we may have arrived at a pre-pandemic point in our ministries, having arrived there, and we've done very well. But our gifts and our abilities is not what's going to take us through. There are three things that God responds to. Number one, the exercise of our faith. That's what he responds to. You know, we're in a kingdom. It is a supernatural kingdom. Senior pastors out there, you know that better than me. We're in a kingdom. It is a spiritual kingdom. And because we're also the only creation that can communicate horizontally and vertically. And because of that, God gives us another form of sight other than natural sight. We can operate in a physical environment with natural sight, but to operate in a spiritual kingdom, we need another type of sight, and it's called faith. Why do you think the Bible says God celebrates and responds, and it's the only way that can please Him? Because you're exercising the sight that He gave you to get ahead. So the Lord responds to faith. And if ever there was a time for us in our ministries to operate by faith, it's now. Not by past experience, but by faith. The second thing is our faithfulness to the call He gave us. What was the call? Because that call, I submit to you, has not changed. He gave us a call, and we must pursue that call. And the third element is He responds to our obedience. He responds to our obedience to what He says. That means we must hear instruction clearly, and we must obey that instruction. So God is looking for impactful, effective leaders that are fruitful. And if ever there was a harvest field, it's now. Because living in South Africa, coming to America, I see the same thing. People are living in fear. For many people have lost their faith, and I wonder where it was in the first place. For many people that were supposedly disciples, where are they? The harvest field is plentiful, but the laborers are few. We need to stick to our first love and our first call. Go and fetch them and disciple them. People are living in fear and chaos. They are lost without a shepherd. This is a very unusual message for me, Pastor Michael, but I think it's important because I think that there are some fundamentals we need to get back to at this time. And I have a heart for leaders and the leadership pain sometimes that they go through. When I look, we have in our own ministry have had some people that in this time haven't come back. So here's the question. I felt the Lord ask me this question. You know, Moses took them out of Egypt, but Joshua had to get them settled. So here's the question, Senior Pastor, and I ask this with respect because it's a question I ask myself as a disciple in our own ministry. Are we happy that we've taken them out of Egypt, but we haven't got them settled yet? Because if we had got them properly settled in the kingdom, they would still be with us. And I feel very convicted about that. I really do. Joshua therefore achieved what Moses couldn't. So let's look at this guy. He's an interesting individual. Let's have a look at this guy. Because the second point I want to make, the first one was we need to change our perspective. The second point is that God has ordained a preferred future for your ministry. A preferred future. It's going to be better than it ever was. And potentially I'm saying that slightly prophetically. That's not my office. I don't operate in that office. But I trust the word of God. You know, in Joshua chapter 1, verse 2 and 3, he says to Joshua, he says, Moses, my servant, is dead. Well, duh, we know that. So now arise, take his place, go over the Jordan, you and all this people, into the land which I'm giving them, the Israelites. Every place, listen to this, every place upon which the sole of your foot shall tread, that I have given you, as I promised Moses. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread. Pastors, I want to encourage you. Every place that you take your ministry, you will claim that territory for the Lord Jesus. Yes. And it will happen. Amen. And it will happen. But what had to happen? Joshua had to take Moses' place. And Old Testament is type and shadow of the New. He had to physically claim territory. We need to go and claim that territory spiritually. I learned a valuable lesson when I first came into the administration of ministry. We were buying a building, and as I told you, this building is 600,000 square meters. It's massive. It's absolutely massive. It's 4 stories. And we had a church of 80 people. That's bizarre. We had no money. It was the most ridiculous business meeting I've ever been in my life. But the first thing that the senior pastor did when he walked into that boardroom is he addressed the people who owned the building and he said, "Gentlemen, God has need of your building." What was he doing? Claim territory. Now is a time in this period of disruption to claim territory. The devil is not taking it away from us. He's actually given us an opportunity, not an obstacle. We need to see it for what it is. And this is the point. For Joshua to cross the Jordan, he had to see it for what it was. He had to actually see it. When you look at your ministry future for your church, what are you seeing? What actually are you seeing? And in how much definition are you actually seeing your ministry and the future? Joshua had to leave from where he was to cross over to go and get it. He had to do things differently to inherit the promise. Have you considered that the Israelites had come out of the wilderness and were going into the promised land? But the giants actually were in the promised land. But God had ordained that's your place. That's your future. Just because it's difficult doesn't mean you aren't in the will of God. And I really want to encourage you, in this time of disruption, there's a ministry opportunity that has been unparalleled on a global scale. And as a church, it's our time to take advantage of it. And I do not mean that to Pastor Michael to sound, an apostolic type of statement. That's not my place. I'm speaking from a ministry leadership perspective and taking the team with you. Because Joshua had to not only see it, he had to take the team with him. The team has to come with us. They have to come with us. We can't do it on our own because the future that God has for our ministries is that big. We can't do it on our own. You can't rely on your past experiences. You can't rely on your previous ministry success because things have irrevocably changed. I just look in our particular case and I look at the church. Our church, although we have a television network, which I'll talk about, but our church has been hands-on. And it should still be hands-on. But all of a sudden in this pandemic, suddenly this digital environment, which has always been there, became something that we began to rely on. But here's my point, folk. If we had have been prepared as Christians, we would have had complete control over the digital environment already. Because we are building potentially our ministries on a platform we don't control. I have no idea of whether the folk involved in social media are Christians or not. I'm just speaking in generalities. If we as the church controlled social media, we can control the destiny. That's true. Where have we been? For me, this has been a wake-up call, and I've had to ask myself these questions. My perspective needs to change. The way I see our preferred future needs to change. What has to happen in order to make that happen? When I look at the way television is going, television on the wall is going to change, so-called linear television, over-the-top television. And you can watch TV on your phone. You can probably watch it on your watch. I'm not that wise, so I don't know how to do that. It has got to that point. Everything has changed, and we need to change with it. We cannot, we might have arrived at this point in ministry having financial success. We've got a big ministry. Suddenly our ministry is halved. That doesn't mean your vision has changed. It just means we've got to change tactics now. Right. There's strategy that's needed. So to experience this preferred future, what do we need to do? We need to focus on hearing the voice of God. And I want to speak on this particular point. In our ministry, and I'm not suggesting our ministry is the best ministry, it's just the one I know. But in our ministry, our greatest times of vision have come out of times of worship. And I want to encourage pastors out there, focus on your worship. And in doing that, I'm going to take the liberty of suggesting that we be careful about how we worship, because so many times with modern songs, we are worshiping God because of what He's done for us. It's time to worship Him because He's on the throne. When we do that, He will give us direction because He's sovereign. We need to hear His voice like never before. You know, I've been in administration of ministry now nearly for 2 decades. And the one thing that I've learnt is that you cannot administrate yourself into your future ministry success. You can only gain access to your future ministry success with an upper room experience. Because then God empowers you. God gives you supernatural wisdom. He will give you direction. And that comes from a time of worship. And I'm an administrator. I assure you, in our ministry, it needs to be squared away. But that's not going to keep your success. What's going to keep your success is your relationship with the Holy Spirit. Because what worked yesterday is not going to work today. The world has changed forever. So what now? You know, when Joshua went into the promised land, there was no template for that. He had to rely on God to do it correctly. We need superior wisdom and empowerment. That's what we need. We need to make sure that it is continual in our lives. We need to leave spiritually where we are and cross over. There's something new that is needed. There's a fresh touch of God that's needed for direction. There's fresh direction, not fresh vision, not fresh call, fresh direction in that call. The difficulty is it's going to mean that we need to embrace change, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in some time to come. We need to take our team with us, and I want to say this to you, that it's not only about individual obedience of the pastor or the pastorate, because individual obedience leads to individual blessing. When there's corporate obedience, it leads to corporate blessing.
That's right.
The whole team needs to go together. Yeah. You're going to need to reinvigorate your pioneering spirit. Difficulty with being a pioneer is we can't see what's on the other side of the horizon. Our leadership confidence needs to be there. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. So we need to reclaim what is ours, and we need to go and conquer new territory. It's very, very important. The third point is that we need to advance based on covenant first. Covenant first, and remain in the presence of God. And I just want to share a few thoughts about this. You know, when in South Africa, we went into a national lockdown on the 26th of March. And that was just overnight. Just like that. Church shut. Overnight. Oh, so last Sunday was our last service. Just like that. The very first thing my senior pastor did is he said, from tomorrow, what we are going to do as a ministry, we employ around 80 people in the ministry through the church and the television network. And he said, from tomorrow, until I decide it changes, we are going to take communion together as a ministry, as a team, every single day. Why? Because we have to live in covenant. We need to understand our covenant, our future, preferred future, our future success. The world's changed. Our ministry is going to be different. Doesn't matter. But we're going to get there because of covenant. And it was important for the team to understand this, because by taking communion with the entire team, the team gets reminded of covenant. You can't tell covenant. You have to experience it.
Right. You can't tell covenant.
So this was a very important thing. In every single internally produced television program we make, so we do behind-the-scenes programs. If you go onto Faith Broadcasting Network, you will see at, I think it's at midday, actually, Eastern Standard Time, you'll see a program called Faith Today. And in that program, communion is taken. Every single internally produced program, we take communion. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, "For God did not give us a spirit of timidity, but of power and of love and of calm and of well-balanced mind, discipling and self-control." It should be discipline and self-control. We cannot, as leaders in ministry, minister out of fear and crisis. We've got to minister out of purpose. And we do that because we understand covenant. We understand that the Lord cut covenant with Abraham, of course. But when I look at Nehemiah, when I look at the miracle of Nehemiah building a wall in 52 days, which is a type and shadow of restoration of the kingdom, which is what we're about right now in our ministries. What did Nehemiah do first? He reminded God of his covenant. Right. Because it was on the basis of covenant that God would provide for that future. And this was a decision that our senior pastor made. If we are going to be successful moving forward through this disruption, and in fact, if we are going to be able to achieve what God has given us to do, it might look different, but we're going to achieve it. We need to do it because we understand and are relying on covenant, the direction of covenant. So it's a very, very important part. When the Egyptians escaped Egypt with Moses, they experienced a relationship with God, hot and cold. But they were frustrated. They never experienced the fullness of it. Well, think about this from a leadership perspective in our ministries, especially if we have lost disciples. They got out of Egypt, but they weren't fully into the promised land yet.
That's right. Amen.
They were frustrated. Yeah. We've got work to do. The harvest field is very, very plentiful still. And so our approach as a ministry was simply to get the whole team to corporately seek God. And then, for those of you who are parents, when your children start teaching you, you realize you've reached another station in life. My son, who's the young adults pastor, stands up and he's going to teach on the communion one of the days. We do it at midday. And he asked this question, and I've never forgotten it. He said, "What do you see when you take communion? What do you actually see? Or is this really just a religious thing that you've done?" Think about this from a leadership perspective, pastors, and your team. When you take communion together with your team, what do they see? Are they seeing a preferred future because of covenant with Jesus? What are they seeing? Do they really understand what this is? It was a real wake-up call for me. And before I move off this point, let me also say this. It's not lost on me that when Joshua took his team through the Jordan, in Joshua chapter 3, it says that what happens is the people were instructed to allow the priests to go first with the ark. The presence of God went first. And when the priests stepped into the Jordan, it parted the waters. And there was dry land. At that time, the armies were marched through. And the priests only left the Jordan when the entire team was through. Here's the message. Your miracle will only happen in the presence of God. For us as pastors and as leaders to take ministries into our preferred future, we can only do that in the presence of God. It is very, very important point and a very important principles. We need to lead our ministries from the garden of His presence in intimate relationship with Him. The fourth point, we need to get clear direction and we actually need to act on it. The miracle in our ministry is going to happen with participation, not observation, which means we actually have to do something. It's one thing to pray and get direction. It's another thing to actually implement it. And I want to put it to you, pastors, that it doesn't matter if people around you think you are crazy, and I'm going to talk about something crazy now. It doesn't matter. Take the hit because the sovereign God has spoken to you. That's right. Just do it. You know, I'm mindful of, it's in Matthew chapter 14, but when the disciples were in the boat and Jesus was walking on the water and Peter gets out and he walks on the water to meet Jesus, here's the thing, the disciples were in the will of God because He had sent them there, but they observed the miracle, Peter experienced the miracle. If we are going to experience the miracle in our ministries, we actually have to get out the boat and do what he said, despite the criticism that will come. And I'll go back to the beginning of my presentation. People will criticize you most often out of self-interest and not out of the corporate interest. We have to have that leadership confidence. The next thing that you're going to need to face is that we are possibly going to need to implement significant change in our ministries. And oh, brother, that's where it gets uncomfortable. I have a board, and I'm just going to illustrate something because this, I beg your pardon?
I was telling my team earlier, our theme for the new year
is change.
You're speaking it.
There we go. Well, there we go.
Well, not as deaf as you thought.
This. That is so good. That was so good. It's time to embrace significant change in our ministries. But here's where the problem comes. This is a staircase. This is change. What I've experienced in being in leadership in ministry is that this is a time of change here, the vertical. The horizontal is the time of consolidation. I put it to you that the longer that period of horizontal exists, the bigger the complacency in the team. You see, I have the unique experience of serving a senior pastor with a 24-month time. I don't know how to describe it. Every 2 years, something new is happening. And for some people, that's a major freak out. But actually, I see it as an incredibly, not a change of direction, just a change of detail. And I see that as incredibly powerful because it challenges a spirit of complacency. Because when you go for a walk, when you walk on a horizontal place, that's not a problem. But when you hike a mountain, that's a whole nother story. Change is uncomfortable. Change is going to make you sweat. Change is going to make you wish you prepared better. Change is possibly going to make you wish you stayed at home, unless you have the resolve to get to the other side. You can't get over a mountain without climbing it. And so change is very uncomfortable. And I put it to you that we are in a time of significant change. Any kind of expansion is going to cost a lot of energy. We're going to need to communicate very clearly. And the sad thing is, pastors, you may lose some. You may lose some. When the heat gets hot, some may burn up.
That's the truth.
Unfortunately. Here's maybe another truth, is that not everybody who helped get you to where you are can take you to where you need to go. And you say to me, well, where's your Christian charity? That's just real. That's just true. Because one of the things I live with being in administration, in ministry, is I need to keep increasing in order to meet the demands of the future. Otherwise, I'm a dinosaur too. I've got to go. Because I'm not a service to the senior pastor anymore. I'm actually an enemy. It's not an easy thing to do. The call or the assignment will not change. Therefore, we must make decisions based on purpose, not pressure. Make decisions based on purpose, not pressure. One of the things we do in our ministry, our vision board, when you walk into the church, unless you have really bad eyesight, you cannot avoid seeing it. It's that big. And it has to be placed in front of the team consistently to keep their resolve strong and understanding this is where we are going. In this time of disruption, when everything we wanted to hold on to is shaking, hold on to the vision. And every decision you make in your ministry needs to be measured. Is it taking us toward our vision, or is it taking us away from the vision? It's a very, very important concept. Also, make decisions based on what the Spirit of God says to you and not the crisis, what the crisis demands. There have been times with my senior pastor where I can literally pull what little hair I've got left on my head out, because I'm saying we need to make this decision now. It is time sensitive. And he will say to me, I know, but I'm not ready yet. Can you handle that pressure as a senior leader in ministry, that you are listening to God? And I know it's pressure, but I'm not making that decision today. I'm not even going to promise you that I'm making it tomorrow. I will make it when God has spoken. That's a pressurized environment to be. But that is something that mature leadership needs to be able to handle, especially in these times. There are going to be many voices around us speaking and giving us suggestions what we should do. But what is God saying? Very, very important. The last point, and I'm going to speak a little bit on this. The last point is lead confidently. Lead confidently in this time. Hold your head up high and employ sound strategy. If ever there was a demand to be placed on leadership ability, it's now. And senior pastors listening, or pastors just leading people, listening to this message. You know, the thing about leadership is it's a science and it's an art. So you can learn how to do it, but doing it is another story. It's a science and an art. Now's the time to invest in your ability to execute what God has given you. Your team, and I can speak now from a team perspective, I need to be behind a decisive leader. Make a decision, even if it's a bad one. There's forgiveness for that, but make a decision. Do not sit on the fence. You need to take me into the preferred future. I will support you. I will work the hours. I will give my time. I will invest my time in that future because I see value in it. But make a decision. That's what we need to do. Your team needs strong, decisive leadership. And so all of us need to make leadership adjustments. All of us, even in the team, need to make leadership adjustments. If ever there was a time for maturity in ministry leadership, it's now. It's now. You know, when Joshua led what was effectively a national invasion into the promised land, that's really what it was. And his mandate was to settle the 12 tribes. There was no template for that. It's one thing to take somebody somewhere and settle them, but they have to then become productive. It's called discipleship. It's called being fruitful. It's one thing for us to take people so far, but we need to complete the journey with them in terms of discipleship. I put it to you that our ministry pride at this time on a global scale is at stake. What do I mean by that? Because who we thought we were discipling aren't disciples. Where are they? Where are they? Now's the time to actually count the score. Where are we in the game? Yeah? Where are we? We need to measure that properly. So there's some critical considerations, and I want to just spend a few moments talking about this. Some critical considerations around leading confidently and employing sound strategy. You know, many of us can pray very well. Many of us possibly can even hear the Lord very well. Not many of us can execute. Strategy seems to be this dilemma for many of us. Here's the question. Well, first point. We need to be able to actually see what is over the horizon. Let me make a very strong statement if I may be bold enough to do that. I heard the late Dr. Miles Monroe minister this. Faith is not hoping for something. Faith is knowing something. There's a big difference. I know that is over the horizon. Faith is what's going to pull it into view. Faith is going to take it out of the supernatural into the physical. And as an administrator, I need to be able to administrate that faith process too, not just the money in the bank. Administration in ministry is not just about what you have, it's about what's still in eternity. I'm going to say that again. Being in administration and leadership in ministry is not only administrating what you have, it's about being what's still in eternity that you're going to call in by faith. And we have to be able to see what's over the horizon. But more, even more than that, we need to be able to see what opportunities are over the horizon. Look, let's just not be spiritual about this for a moment. If we go into business, successful entrepreneurs have what you call a nose for an opportunity. Our ministry opportunities are not entrepreneurial in terms of material acquisition, they're entrepreneurial in terms of souls.
Right.
Where's our opportunity for souls in the future? Where can our ministry be involved for souls? Can you see over this horizon? Can you see what most people can't see? That'll come out of a time of worship, Pastor Michael. But that's where we need to hear God for that. Can you see? For us in our ministry, in the television community, I'm in South Africa, I'm part of the National Association of Broadcasters. Not because I like to sit in committees, because there I get a glimpse of what's over the horizon. And I can see where broadcasting is going to be in 5 years' time, and in 10 years' time, and in 15 years' time. And I need to take that and filter that through what God is already saying. The next point, we need to be bold enough to assess where our ministries currently are. That can be painful. For any team, I used to play rugby, South African version of American football. Very different rules, but still, there comes a point in the game where you've actually got to be bold enough to realize, where am I in the game? What has my progress been like? We shouldn't be looking at other ministries. We should be looking at God's timetable for us. Just maybe we think we're successful, but we're behind the curve. You can't be jealous of something that you don't want. You should want what God has for you. We need to take a temperature check. We need to take a measurement of where we are in our ministry so that we can begin to determine the strategies to get to that next point, to get over the horizon where we can see where our ministry needs to be. What in our ministry needs to change to meet the future? For many ministries, for many coming into this pandemic, the whole way that you were doing church is gone. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Number 3, we need to also determine the essential skills, knowledge, and technology that's going to be needed moving forward. What worked yesterday isn't going to work tomorrow. And the older I get, I'm 58 now, but the older I get, technology is just moving away from me so fast. It's so difficult. I look at my granddaughter, who's 10 months old, and she already understands how to work my cell phone. And I'm thinking, what part did I miss? Technology is changing at such a rapid pace. What skills do we need to minister in the future? Because just possibly, the ones we use to get here are not the ones that are going to help us survive. We need to make a change, and we need to make a careful measurement of that. What knowledge do we need? What knowledge do we need? And I'm now not talking about the word. I'm now talking about technology knowledge. What knowledge do we need? I believe that we're at a nexus point, and we have to be prepared for the future. And if we are unprepared, we have some work to do. The way when I teach, Pastor Michael, when he introduced me, he said that I teach third-year Bible school students, and I do, and I do very spiritually. Can I tell you how I do that? I tell them you need to divide your life into lanes, like a bowling alley, and in each lane is a mouse, and each of those suckers has to be running. Now, the one lane could be your prayer life. I'm being facetious about being spiritual, by the way. The one lane could be your prayer life. The next lane could be your preaching life. The next one could be your home cell. The next one could be your financial life. The next one could be whatever. And each of those mice need to be running. For some of mine, they've become big fat rats and I need to kick them because they slow down. They got lazy. Yeah? That's how I teach them. And I teach them because that is the way we need to look at things. So if we look in our life and in our ministries in these various lanes, where have we got sluggish? Where do we need to develop to get ahead? The next point, whatever decisions you make and whatever you need to implement now going forward, you need to set an uncompromising time schedule for it. God will do things in His timing, but unless you give Him clay to mold, He has nothing to mold. So you have to give Him a plan, and it needs to have a time element in. We also need to make sure that the team understands clearly the why they're doing what they're doing. They need to understand it, which is the vision. But not only the vision, they need to understand the implications of the vision. So we're going to get people saved. Yes, but what is the implication of that? No, because they're going to heaven. Or what about the fact that they're going to have an abundant, productive life while they're here? You know what I mean? We need to clearly understand those things. We need in our ministries to become a master of things. What do I mean by that? We need to become a master at what we do. We need to become competent at the way we do ministry. The team follows competence. Team runs from incompetence. We need to become competent at what we do. We need to develop people more than we ever have before. And now I'm speaking in the dynamic of teams. We need to develop people. I'll give you a very simple, basic example. In my office in the ministry, what I'm known for, and I promise you this is my reputation, you dare not arrive in my office with a problem unless you have a solution. I will physically throw you out. I love you, but I will throw you out. And our teams, along with ourselves as leaders, need to be problem solvers because problems are opportunities. They are ministry opportunities. So it's got a little bit difficult to do church because now they've restricted our numbers. Fine. What are you going to do? What is your suggestion? How are you going to get around that? I can't build a youth group anymore because I can't get enough people. Is that a problem or is that an opportunity? It's just an obstacle. How are you going to get around that? And who says that that is going to be like that forever anyway? So what are you building so that when that's lifted, it all comes together? What is your strategy? We need to develop our teams. We need to develop people. Nehemiah employed one of the most sublime strategies I've ever seen in Scripture. When he built the wall, if you go and read chapter 1 to 6 carefully, and you should, if you're in leadership, that is a textbook for leadership. He put people in places to build where they lived. What is the effect of that? You know, if I was giving a fancy business lecture, I would say he leveraged vested interests. What does that mean? Well, look, if you were building in this area, you would make sure that that wall is built properly because your family's at stake. No self-respecting father is going to do a sloppy job. What is the strategic importance of that for our ministry? Well, one aspect could be that we make sure that we've got people in our ministry with a vested interest for success. Particularly, you know, one of the things I've noticed can happen in ministry, we have a vision and we just consume people's gifts instead of elevating their gifts. Right. So sometimes we get people to do what we need instead of what they need. When your team is doing what they need because it's their gifting, it's what makes them come alive, they will do it better than anybody else. I will build a wall for you if you really want. But as a qualified CPA, it will fall down. I will do it because I will serve you, but it's not my gifting. You're consuming me instead of celebrating my gifting, where I will build the wall so it doesn't fall down with my gifting. It's a very, very important point. The last 2 points, the last 2 points, make sure in your ministries that your giving as a ministry is where it should be. Not your giving into your ministry, you're giving from your ministry. If you're not giving from your ministry, it's become a financial swamp and swamp star. We have discovered in our ministry, and my entire experience with our ministry has been like this, is that we've been givers and givers and givers, and we actually say to people, we are not reliant on your tithes and offerings, we are reliant on our giving. Not what you give to us, what we give, because we are planting seed. We run a Christian radio station in South Africa, in East London. It's a community radio station. Now, community broadcasters under the COVID pandemic have been decimated. Their income has fallen. Some of them are just no longer there. This ministry is doing better than it was before the pandemic. Why? Because we're givers. The ministry gives 10% of its income gets given. And we're careful where we sow that seed. And I believe that God is a God of covenant. Your giving is not a donation, it's a spiritual transaction. And God responds to covenant. And then the last point I want to make on finances in your ministry, and this will set you up for success in your future. One of the things we have always done is of all the money that comes in, we take 10% and that we use to tithe. We take another 10% and that goes into a special account called a seed account. And that is sown very strategically into other ministries. And we never sow into other ministries that aren't also givers. Right. Because then you're sowing into a swamp. Amen. And the third 10% gets used for a savings account. That's the way we stay out of debt. Because our savings of 10% over time is what we use to buy motor vehicles. It's what we use to buy things. It's what we use to build things. So that as a ministry, we owe no man anything other than to love him. We run the ministry on 70%. And I propose to you that is a financial structure going forward into your ministry future that will set you up for success. Budget your ministry on 70% and you will never look back again. For some, 2020 has been a year of uncomfortable disruption. In fact, it's probably been a year of uncomfortable disruption for most of us. We as a ministry decided that it was going to be a platform for success. Amen. What are you going to do? And pastors out there, I go back to the beginning of my presentation today. My heart is for you out there. I understand the leadership pain that you go through. I understand the criticism that you take. I understand that what it takes not to respond to that. I understand what it takes to allow it just to bounce off and retreat back into your prayer room and seek the heart of God. And to be stand up and be counted. I understand what it means to be great, because you need to give people what they need, not what they're shouting for. Right. And this message was a little tricky for me to do. It's not my normal thing. And so I submit it to you with humility, and I trust that it has blessed you. I trust that it is going to elevate you into a preferred future that I know God has for you. Thanks very much.
Excellent. Wow. Here's your homework. Everybody ready for homework? You must watch it one more time and send me your notes. For those that are in Bible school, one of the things that you've heard me say multiple times is that the reason I give notes is not to make it easy for you, but that you can go back in 10 years, 20 years, and you have those notes available that you can regurgitate, you can recalculate, you can sit down and literally reformulate through what you have in possession. What was given today, you might not need for 5 years. You might not need for 6 months. You might not need for 2 weeks. But if you just allow what this message is, and let me tell you, it's good. Some of you might not know how good it is until you're sitting in shoes that you need them. But if you have notes for these, so listen, the only reason I'm asking for notes is not as much for me, it's more of accountability. But I want you to watch this one more time. I want you to take notes. Some of you already have. So add to your notes your second time. You're going to get more your second time than you did your first time. And then I want you to put them somewhere. Not in the garbage. not in a drawer next to your bedroom that you're going to empty out next year and just say, oh, yeah. I have notes all the way from 1984 that I have the ability to go back to, and I do. They're right in my office. In fact, I gave them away one time. I had a protege that I was growing and developing, maturing, and I was taking them through my Bible college that I went through with my notes. Well, they decided they no longer needed to learn anything. They knew it all, and so they broke off, and I simply said, I want all my notes back. I went after my notes aggressively. Why? Because they're more than just notes.
Yeah.
They're rich, valued treasures that you can always reflect upon.
Yeah.
So your homework next week, watch this one more time. Send me your notes. If you want to take pictures, I don't care how you do it. But this is for you. I want you to log them somewhere, put them somewhere. Now, I wrote my notes in my iPad. That's nice. Print them. Because if that goes down, you've lost them. Make sure there's a way that you can have them in more than one dimension and more than one way to regurgitate them. Amen? Any questions? Wow, that's good, huh? Yes.
How do you find out?
Hold on, I'm going to come to you.
Okay. How do you find out how much a specific ministry gives?
How do you find out how much a specific ministry gives? Well, you'll always find this, and that is that you have the ability to ask. Where do they sow? So this house, we sowed last year. We tithed and gave a total of, I believe, I don't want to exaggerate, 30%?
That's good.
30%. So we don't just tell you that we give, this church, and at the annual business meeting, we actually show how we give. So that should be available if you're asking.
Okay.
Yes.
So how, as a ministry or like a whole church, do you give an actual 10%? Because I get as a person.
How as a ministry do you actually give 10%? We actually, good, you can do that.
Yeah, what we do is we measure that every Monday, literally, and we've got lots of accounts, but we work out everything that's come in, and we do a transfer on that Monday, every single Monday, into a seed account, into a tithe account, every Monday.
I'm going to answer you on his tabernacle. I don't know. It's not my department. I have no clue. But I know we do it, so
Yeah.
I have no idea. Yes. When Joshua was claiming the land, how did he go ahead and make those decisions? When God was not speaking.
Well, the instruction that he was given was to bind the word around his neck, meditate on it day and night. Yes, exactly. Be very courageous. Not just courageous, be very, very courageous. But I want to put it to you, okay, that God gives you direction and he gives you purpose, but he also gives you a brain.
Right.
Use it.
Yep. That's good.
It's about as basic as I can put it. That's what it is. Yeah.
Any more questions? Very good. Can you give Pastor, Brother Clur, a hand clap for him? Thank you. You have your homework. Thank you all for watching online. You can send it to me as well to Dr. Spencer at empoweringpastors.com. Yeah. Hey, you almost married?